Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to the second part of the mystery slow stitch along that I started 2 weeks ago on Friday, and I've got my two pieces here finished and stitched, the two collage pieces. If you are new here and you've just arrived and wondered what's going on, it's maybe an idea to go back 2 weeks ago and watch part 1, the mystery slow stitch. Otherwise you might be a bit lost. So you'll see that I very sneakily, in the thumbnail, the little screen at the beginning of the video, did not put a picture of the finished piece, which I normally do, just to keep the air of mystery going. Now, I might just warn you all to sit down and take some deep breaths and don't be scared, because I'm going to cut this. I'm going to cut these two pieces in a certain way. Now if what I'm going to do really freaks you out, you've done part 1, you're ready to go, you're all excited, and then you see what I'm going to do and you freak out because you think you don't fancy doing what I'm going to do, at the end of the video I will talk about a more straightforward alternative, if you like. But I've done one already, it's hiding underneath the dark one. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to get something circular, and I've got this lovely little sugar bowl, cold cloth china, bone china, it was my Auntie Lily's from a tea set, which is round, and it's about 4 inches across because my finished piece is going to be 8 inches. Just to recap, I'm making these two pieces for an exhibition next year, and we've been told they have to be 20 centimetres or 8 inches. So my piece currently measures a bit more than that, because I'm going to trim it back, because it has to be a specific size, so it's always an idea to make it bigger so that you can trim it back. You know, if yours don't have to be an exact size, then you don't need to worry. So mine's about 9 inches at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to centralise my upturned sugar bowl, and I've gone for 4 inches, so then I've got a couple of inches all around. And you can either just do it by eye if you're happy with that, or you can then get your ruler, you know, and measure from each side that it's equidistant. And let me show you the done one, the one that I've already cut first. You can't really see the cut, I don't think, but I've done it. It's there, look. So now I've got a circle, a dark circle, and I've got this piece with a hole. So what I'm going to do basically is the same thing with the light coloured one, and then transpose the circles, and then later on I'll talk about what I'm going to do to join them together. Now this is why I did recommend that you had something a bit sturdy, like some woolly blanket or low loft wadding batting, or flannel or something, because it just makes it easier to handle, because you see it's quite rigid. And don't panic about cutting the stitches, it's fine. This is an art piece, not, you know, it's not going to go through a washing machine or anything. And even if it was, I still wouldn't really worry, because we're going to do more stitching. But anyway, so don't freak out about, I've done this before. It's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how I did that. And I'm going to just use scissors and my sugar bowl, but you do need some sharp scissors with a nice point. I'll just put that to one side for now. And you need something to draw with that will show up on your cloth. Now on my dark cloth I did use my quilter's blue pen, and it did show up enough. But otherwise, if you've got a white pencil or something like that, or some other kind of marking implement, you could also, if you really can't find anything to show up, do it from the back. Draw the circle from the back. I prefer to do it from the front so that I can see what I'm cutting in terms of my cloth, you know, but if you absolutely have to do it from the back, then I'm sure that would go fine too. And I'll talk later about if you don't get a nice neat cut, you know, there's all kinds of things you can do to hide it, and the effect will still be beautiful. So look at that, that's like, we could do the moon phases, couldn't we? I mean, there's so many things you could do with this. Look, here's the moon waxing, and here it is, we have to do it the other way then. And here it is waning. Sorry, the crossover into the moon stitching project. So I'm going to put my sugar bowl on, and like I said, because this is for an exhibition, I am being a bit finicky, so I am going to get my square ruler that I can see through and just check that I'm central So that is, you know, or that I can make it central when I trim it back. So I think that's good enough. And now I'm going to draw my line with my blue pen. You could use a normal soft pencil on this lighter coloured one. I'm going to try doing it without getting my head in your way, but you want to be as precise as you can be. You can do no more. But if you've got something with a nice point and something like a bowl, I find a bowl easier to hold than a plate because you're sort of higher up with your fingers. And then I'm just going to go gently and slowly, as close as I can to the edge of the bowl without putting my head in your way, but I'm sure you know what drawing looks like. Just all the way around. There we go. Get the bowl off, and there's my blue circle. Don't need the bowl anymore, and breathe. I find the drawing a bit more, you know, heart racing than the cutting. So now you need to get your very sharp scissors. Now if you don't have scissors with a nice sharp point, but you do have a craft knife or something, you can, and a cutting mat obviously, you can put this on your cutting mat and I would just start making a little nick with your craft knife just to get the point of your scissors in, and then I would cut the rest with scissors. Unless you've got a very steady hand, because you do want, like I said, to be as precise as you can. So I'm going to choose a cloth that seems receptive to the point. Like here I know I've got two layers. I've got the you know, the linen underneath and then the lace over the top. Here is just cotton, so this looks like a good place to start because I know I'm only going through this layer of cotton and the woolly blanket. Don't choose somewhere to start that's on a junction, you know, where there's two layers of cloth or anything like that. So I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to go onto my line and just make a little nick. And I've got my finger behind. This is not going as easily as the black one did when nobody was watching me. There we go, I've made a little nick. And then I'm just going to get myself in there, trying to stay on the line as much as possible because obviously we want both sides to be, you know, neat. So once you've got a nick, the best way to be precise is to get your scissors in and then cut. And as you cut, you turn. You see with my left hand how I'm rotating it, and just go careful. And you can get your head in over the top so you can see what you're doing. I'm largely doing this on trust. And just work your way around. And as you go it will get easier. Cutting as best you can on the middle of your line. So I'm going to get my head in and do the rest, so I'll edit out the back of my head. Okay, so there we go. So I've cut that. I think I am going to take this one and dampen it and get rid of the blue. I am going to put something over the join, but I don't want to be worrying about the blue seeping through. So I'm going to pause, go and do that, wait for that to dry, and then I'll come back and show you the next stage, okay? Okay, I've done that, I've dampened it, and I think it's dry enough. I just dabbed it with a little corner of a damp cloth. So now I've got my 4 elements. So let's start with the dark. So we want the dark background and the light circle. So now you just simply, all being well, pop this in. Now you've got a chance, if you want, to play with the direction of your stitching line. So you could either line them up so that the stitches go, you know, horizontally and vertically, or you could, if you thought that looked good, put it under an angle. I think I quite like them lined up. But also you can think about, you know, if you've got a way of up that's up, if you think it looks better one way up than the other. I've got this little bit of dark velvet here. I think I quite like the idea of that at the bottom, because it's very dark, and dark in a design is heavier, so it makes more visual sense at the bottom. So I'm going to put that at the bottom of my piece, and then I'm going to look at this, and I quite like the way this element here, this kind of vertical, is perpendicular. If it was purple it would be perpendicular to the dark velvet. So I'm just thinking that with that just makes a nice, and then that almost lines up with the edge of that. So look in your own piece, you know, pay a bit of attention and get it a nice way round, and then you should be able to just push it in like so. there we go. And then obviously I'll let's show you the other one. I can always pop it back in if it moves. I'm just going to carefully move that to one side. And obviously it needs to be attached, but we'll come to that. So now I've got my light coloured piece, and have another look at this and see if I want it a certain way up. Again, I kind of like this element which is coming off the bottom, so I think I'm going to have that at the bottom. And then let's get the circle in. And again, I don't know if it shows up, but there's another piece coming up this way that's almost by chance the same width as this. So I think that way round. And I'm just easing it in with my fingers. Because once the join's covered, people who are not, maybe textile people could work it out, but you know, or maybe other people could work it out, but it's kind of, how did you do that? Because it almost looks like that's one piece of cloth, but you know, there's other ways of doing it of course, but I just love that. So I don't know if you can see them both side by side, if I can fit them in. Can you see that? So you've got a light circle in a dark background and a dark circle in a light background. So how are we going to attach those together, Catherine, I hear you ask? Well, let's do this one with you, and I'll do the other one later on. So I am going to mount my pieces, because that's what I've been told to do, on some 8-inch square artists canvases, or 20 centimetre square artist canvases. Now I have had to order them because I didn't have any, and they sent me two that were described as artist canvases, and when they came they weren't. They were only artists' boards, not what I wanted, so I'm having to wait for the replacement to come. But anyway, that I think is a whole other thing, because it's not necessary that you mount your pieces on canvas. So I think what I might do in 2 weeks' time, in our Slow Stitch Friday slot, in 2 weeks' time, I'll show you how I mount textile pieces onto artist canvas, because it's something I used to do a lot when I was a normal, no, it wasn't even a normal quilter, in the past, you know, when I worked in a different way. These days I prefer my cloths generally to be loose and floppy when they hang, but you know, I'm doing what I'm told for a change. So I think in 2 weeks' time I'll show you how I do that, because I've worked out over the years a very specific way of doing it that gives a nice neat finish, and that's pretty straightforward to do. So, but I'll do that as a separate video, because it's not only for this, you know, any textile art or slow stitch or any piece you've got so that you might want to display on the wall, that might be useful to you. Okay? So all that wittering being said, depending on what you want to do with it, or even not, I mean, if you want to make a rice bag, can you now imagine how fabulous that would be if you did 2 pairs? So then you could have opposite sides of your rice bag, the light and dark backgrounds. If you wanted to make a rice bag, what I would do then was I would make my 4 pieces, I would trim them all down to the same size, and then I would make a 5th piece for the base, maybe just the plain, or just, you know, some woolly blanket just with a plain piece of cloth and do some stitching on it. And then I would probably then blanket stitch those together if it was a blanket, you know, if you had, or wadding or something thick, rather than putting a seam, because a seam would be a bit thick. So if you go back to my rice bag video, if you haven't seen it, I will put it in the description box below, a link to it. There I just made it with seams, but you could just blanket stitch your edges together, and then you make the lining and the tabs and the tie in exactly the same way as you do, you know, for a normal rice bag. So that's how I deal with that. And I really want to make one now. I really, really do. Maybe I will make some for the exhibition. I'll see, because it's quite time consuming. Anyway, in whatever case, sorry, there's a lot of wittering. I think it's easiest to put something behind this now, but I'm going to put, I don't really need to, because like I said, I'm going to mount it on canvas, but just for a bit of stability and to make it a bit easier to do the stitching, I'm going to use this bit of old sheet that I have not ironed, many apologies, but it's very thin. Now again, it depends on what you want to use this for. If you want it to be something that's going to have a back showing for whatever reason, then maybe choose something pretty for the back, but I'm just going to lay it on this bit of old sheet make sure it's big enough so that I can trim it, and that's fine. Put my circle back in, and now you've got something that you can attach them both to. So then I'm going to get some pins, and I'm going to put a few strategic pins, maybe 1/2 inch away from the edge, both outside the circle, so I'm going through the backing as well, and inside the circle. So I'll just go ahead and get a few pins in, because I don't think that's very interesting to watch. Okay, so I've done that, and I've just turned it over to make sure that my backing cloth is laying, you know, reasonably flat, and I haven't inadvertently rumpled it up or anything. So there we go. So now I've got in my needle some neutral coloured regular machine sewing thread. Of course, it's very difficult to get a thread that you can't see on black and you can't see on white, but so I've just gone with neutral, and I'm going to just, and this is a bit finickety. Actually, I might just put a few pins around the edges as well, just maybe one in each corner, just so that backing doesn't fold in on me and get stitched where it shouldn't be. You know that happens to the best of us and the worst of us and all of us. Right, so now I'm just going to basically just do a kind of ladder stitch. I've pinned my thread down, there we go, in and out of the circle and the outside. And this is just to hold it together, and then I can go back and do something fancier over the top. Now this might depend on the structure of your piece, because I've got this woolly blanket which is quite stable. I can get away probably with going quite near to the edge. So I'm going to come up about 1/8 of an inch inside my circle, like so. It's not really ladder stitch, it's just a stitch. I mean, you know, I don't know if you call it ladder stitch. And then I'm going to go down 1/8 of an inch into my background, and if I can, I'm going to come forward. If it's too thick, you might have to stab in and out. I can come forward. Your stitches don't have to be particularly close together. I guess that worked out about a 1/4 of an inch apart. And then again, 1/8 of an inch in. Whatever shows here with these construction stitches will have to be covered, so that's why you don't want to go too far. And you do want to try and get right through into your backing cloth. Actually, I do think it's going to be better if I stab stitch, because I don't think I'm going right through. So this is a bit awkward to do, and so you can see. But as close to the edge as you dare. I can maybe get a little bit closer to the edge. Just to hold it. So that's pretty boring to watch. I think you get the idea, and I must say it's quite difficult to do when I can't really get in and see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to work my way all the way around. See, those first couple of stitches are a bit big. I'm going to struggle to cover that. So I'm going to go and work my way all the way around. I might even go back and take that out and get them a bit closer together. Doing this just to hold everything together. Okay, and there we go. So that's all done, and so now it's really stable, and it's, you know, a whole thing. It's all held together on the back by that piece of backing cloth. I've still got the pins in the corners. What I probably would then do is tack this down. And what you can do if you've got thickish woolly blanket is just from this side, just put some tacking stitches through the backing into the wool, not right the way through, you know, just to hold the edges down. So now you can take a view on what you want to do next with it. I mean, if you don't mind the way that looks as it is, you can call that done, simple. Or you can also now just take this as a surface and use it to inspire you to go on and do all kinds of fancy stuff on it. If you want to cover that line, you've got various options. Of course, you could use a bit of twisted sari silk, just twist it as you go and couch it on. That would look quite nice. Or lace, or you know, anything, basically anything. I did have the idea, and you might have seen the picture on the thumbnail, of putting this twisted cord that I made, and all I did was twist together one strand of this lovely Icelandic wool, Alafoss Lopi, and one strand of this less lovely generic black, whatever it is, and one little strand of this red sock yarn. Now because you use two strands when you twist, it's like cloth twine only with wool. I held the red with the black because the black was thinner, and then I twisted it with the white. So it was exactly the same process as cloth twine. If you don't know how to make cloth twine, there's a video, there's a whole playlist about cloth twine. And if you struggle with my way of making cloth twine, which is just the basic using your own two hands way, I know some of you do because you know you've got issues with your hands, then Marion on Marion's World has a method where she pins the end down and she wets the cloth. Actually, you can wet the cloth my way as well, that might also help. Another tip is not to have your strips too wide, that can trip people up. But anyway, it's not really about cloth twine. There's also a method that Jeri came up with a lady from our Facebook group. I believe Elizabeth was involved with that, over on Jeri Bellini's channel, of a different way. I don't think it's twining, I think it's wrapping. But however way you get some kind of cord, whether you twist a bit of sari silk or you make cloth twine, sorry, there's all kinds of noise going on. The clock's chiming and the washing machine's spinning. Or whether you use some wool, just, you know, to cover that, you just couch something over it. And again, you could do that and call that done. You could also go further. If you liked the look, or you didn't find this too ugly as it is, and you didn't want to couch, you could now just do some feather stitch or blanket stitch, or you know, any of your lovely stitches that you like doing when you're doing your slow stitching around there. Any of the stitches that you might use in crazy patchwork, you could it's now just a surface to stitch on. So I would say if you've done this, oh sorry, there's someone delivering, so maybe that's my canvas boards. Yes indeed, it was my canvas boards. They're okay. I just got cheap ones because I'm going to completely cover them. So if you want to see how I do that, that'll be in 2 weeks. Right. What was I saying before the lovely man came with my canvas boards? Can't remember. Oh, fancy stitching. Yeah, you can just, you know, do whatever floats your boat. So basically you've created this lovely surface. In fact, you've created 2 lovely surfaces, and you can go to town. For my part, I don't think I'm going to use my cord, because I think it's too much. These are kind of to accompany that large piece that I showed you a few videos ago in this Friday series. I think it was called Too Many Projects, Too Little Time, or Overwhelmed by Too Many Projects, or something of that kind, where I've got a large wall hanging that I'm working on. And it's mainly black and white, but there's a little bit of red in it. But I think that's too much. I'm not happy with that, is the short way of saying it. But maybe, baby, I'll just couch on some of this plain, lovely, thick Alafoss Lopi, which is lovely and fluffy, and it's not actually plied, it's sort of felted almost together. Now what I can do, because the stitches don't really show up on the cream background, I've still got a pin there, get rid of those 2 pins, is just couch it just inside, because it's not structural anymore, it's all structurally held, you know, it's now stable. Oh, by the way, I did just want to mention, I spot here that there are little stitches popping up because I've cut my stitching. Like I said before, I'm not worried about cutting through my stitching. If you want to do this, it's inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it, because it's going to be hanging on a wall. It's not a problem. Even in a rice bag, I wouldn't find it a problem. You know, and if it came undone at one point, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think it will. It never has so far. She said boldly. But I know people do worry about cutting stitching because it's not a normal thing in normal quilting and garment making and so on. Stitches being cut is a big no-no, but here it's not a big no-no, it's a big yes, yes. Okay, so I'm going to couch on some of this, and it is a bit thin here and there, so I'm going to make sure I've got a nice fluffy long enough bit. You know, it's just the nature of it that it varies a bit in thickness. If I go there from that thin bit, I'll save that though, still nice for something. I like to cut myself a bit that's plenty long enough. And I'm sure you've seen couching before if you've been here for any length of time. One of the issues with couching is what do you do with your ends, you know, if you're making a continuous shape like a circle. So you can make a feature of them. I sometimes do that. I did that in my Slowstitch book project when I did the red circles, and just cross them at the bottom. Or you can do your best, depending on what you're couching. This cuts quite a nice blunt end. I might try and get an invisible join at the end, in which case I won't put it at the bottom here, because that is where you'd expect to find it, so you're more likely to see it, if that makes sense. So I'll put it somewhere else, somewhere that's the same colour as the thing I'm couching, like maybe there, where that lace is next to it. Yeah, so I think I'll aim to have my join somewhere there. Now I don't pin my thing on, I just hold it with my thumb and go couch as I, you know, lay it on as I go. I've got 2 strands of beige embroidery thread in my needle, so I'm going to give myself a slightly longer end there to start with, so I can trim that back. And I'm going to lay it just on the black, just inside the circle. And I hope you can see and I can see, so I'm just going to keep rolling it out just to the very edge of the circle, so that it covers the beige stitches that are showing up on the black. And now I'm going to come up just into the cream, go over, and now I don't really mind if I don't go right through, because it's all held by that first line of stitching that I did. So now I can just worry about laying my wool where I want it and making sure my couching stitches are how I want them. So I jump over, take a little step forward, and jump back and take a little step forward. That's how I couch, if you're new here. It's not the normal way, but it's how I do it. So I'll go ahead and go all the way around. This wool is molting a bit, so it might have to have a little bit of shearing going on at the end. Doing that, just pushing it into place with my thumb as I go, not pulling it tight or letting it be loopy, just letting it lay. And once I've got back round here, I'll come back and show you how I'm going to deal with the ends. Okay, I'm coming back round to where I started. So how to get those 2 ends exactly matching, just give it a bit of a haircut here and there, is to lay them on when you're, you know, as close to the end as you dare, and maybe half an inch away from the end. Lay them on next to each other, and then get your scissors underneath, being careful to only cut the wool and not your work. And actually get the blade of your scissors underneath, and then just lay them back in place. And then make a straight cut through both of them at once. And then they should match exactly, she said. And then I'm just going to make sure as I go along that I end up with a stitch right at the end. Now this is quite thick, felty wool, so it's not really anything there to unravel. It might be different if you had an acrylic yarn or something like that. You can almost just push the ends together. Acrylic yarn, I maybe would even leave a little overlap because it's inclined to spring back. You know, not cut them exactly matching. So now I'm going to go straight through to the back, right at the end of that one piece there, and then come up just at the end of that other piece, push it right over. I'm sorry, I hope you can see what I'm doing, but I need to see as well. And then go over again and make sure I get a stitch. And that's not helpful. Why does it always not, just when you're doing something tricky? Like that. So I'm not going to put a stitch in the middle. I've just put a stitch at either end, and now I just need one more stitch in there. To fill it in. You see it did spring back a bit, there's a tiny gap, but you've got to get your nose right in there to see it. And if you didn't know that join was there, in fact I now can't see it anymore. That's pretty good, I'm quite happy with that. So I'll finish that off on the back. I think I'm probably going to do more stitching on this, and obviously I've got to do the other one, but I don't know what yet, and I do want to give it some thought, because like I said, it's for an exhibition. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I am going to come back and I'm going to tell you in a minute the less stressful, if you thought that was stressful, cutting that circle option. Now I would say though, have faith in yourself, give it a go. I know you've spent time creating this piece, but if you cut your circle and it goes jaggedy, you can just sew something bigger over it, and you know, some wider sari silk or whatever, or lace, or you know, the strategic buttons, embroidery. I would strongly encourage you to give it a go, because I think the result is so striking, and I think you're in general capable of more than you think you are. So if you've got sharp scissors and a steady-ish hand, then you know, give it a go. But if you really are freaked out by the circle and you really don't want to risk cutting your work and messing it up because you absolutely love it, I can understand that. The other thing I thought you could do, it still involves cutting it, we're still cutting it. And in fact there was two thoughts I had. One is you could simply cut your squares into 4. So maybe you want to trim them back first to, you know, a square. So that's beeping to tell me it's finished, the washing machine. You know, to a square, whatever size you've got, but a square, and then cut that into 4 equal quarters, and then cut your dark one, and not with the moon, sorry, the moon, I've got the moon on the brain, not with the circle, although you could then cut this again, keep cutting it. I don't think there's any limit to how often you could cut it. When you've still got your squares, you know, back to the beginning, rewind, there's no circles. When you've still got your squares, cut them each one into 4 equal parts, and then put 2 whites with 2 blacks, or whatever colours you've got, and vice versa. So then you've got 2 4 patches, and then you'll join them together on a backing cloth in exactly the same way that I've done with the circles. And then the other idea I had was that you could cut them into 4 equal squares, and that gives you 8, and then you could make a smaller piece for a central square. Maybe for this I would maybe do a red one in exactly the same way, but just whatever, a quarter of the size, and then you could do a 9 patch. So you could put your one, say you made a red square as the centre, and then you've got 8, 4 white and 4 black, and you can put them checkerboard and join them all together into a 9 patch. And I'm sure there's many other things you can do with this same technique of creating some background pieces on woolly blanket with cloth scraps and doing your lovely slow stitching, and then cutting up and reassembling. But this was just the starter for 10, as they say, and it's something I have done before. Like I said, I didn't have any examples to show you. I did it some time ago, and they've all sold. So there we go. So that's that one done to that stage. I'm going to go and get this one to the same stage, and then when I've done that I'm going to give some more thought to, I might do some more stitching around the edge of the circle outside, I might do some stitching inside, I just don't know, and it might be some time before I do know. I might pin them up somewhere and just keep an eye on them, but I'll get them both up to this stage, and then in 2 weeks time, you know, and you obviously feel free to go on and do whatever you want with yours. In 2 weeks time I'll show the mounting on canvas. So I will have to have one of them done by then. So, and I'll show you that one at least, if not both of them. I'll try and have them both done. So if you want to wait and see my fancy stitching, then you can. Otherwise you can just, you know, do your own thing. witter, witter, witter. Is that everything I said I'd tell you at the end? Yeah. So 2 weeks time will be any more fancy stitching I may or may not have done. I might decide to leave it like that. I think it's quite striking. I do want a little touch of red somewhere just because that's my theme. But that could be as simple as one red cross stitch somewhere. Could be just that. I don't know. I need to live with it for a bit. So 2 weeks time will be, I'll show you whatever I've done, if I've done anything, and I shall come back with my canvas, my artist canvas. You see they're just, you know, the cheap ones. And I'll show you how I will mount that onto one of those with neat edges, so that then you can just hang it on a hook or a nail in the wall as a little art piece, as a little, not framed but mounted art piece. Okay, so I hope that was okay. I hope you like that. I hope you don't need to lie down in the dark room after watching me cut my stitching. But you see, it's worth it. I just love this. I need to do more of it. I say that a lot. So many things, aren't there? So many things. And definitely want a rice bag, or maybe several for the exhibition. We'll see. If I was doing a rice bag, I'd do 6-inch squares and then obviously a smaller central circle. And I definitely use woolly blanket just for the structure, or wadding. Okay. Looking forward to seeing rice bags made with this technique in the Facebook group, so I can at least have vicarious rice bags before I get around to making my own. So get cracking, the lot of you. Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to joining me next time for more cloth tales. Lots of love and kisses. Bye bye.